Okay, so we have a full house here. So today is it's an important session. So all of us, pretty much, almost all of us, have used Jira in some form or the other, and my feeling is that a lot of us still wonder, how it really works. There are a lot of things about Jira which we don't understand, and it's a pretty complex sort of beast, if you will. So what we're going to cover today is actually what we're not just going to cover today, but over a set of 5 sessions, we'll demystify this, and I've tried to put this in a manner that, we focus on concepts and we understand it from like the core concepts, and try to make it simple, so that you can absolutely understand how things work there, and then play around with it the way you want. Today's session, so this is the roadmap. So today's session is just about setting up. So understanding what are the fundamental concepts of Jira. And it typically revolves around issues, workflows, and screens. These are the three words that are important to understand. And this is sort of a diagram which you can keep in mind, make a mental note of, because we'll be referring this throughout the presentation. So as you can see here, there are basically issues, there are workflows, there issue then that sort of gets abstracted out into issue type schemes, workflow schemes, projects. We'll touch upon these one by one, but just a quick show of hands, how many of you feel like you know what issues are? Okay, I'm not going to quiz you further, so you can say it. How many of you know what workflows are? How many of you know what workflow schemes are? How many of you know what issue type schemes are? How many of you know what a project is? Okay, everybody knows. So this is the part which we're going to also cover today. So let's start with issues. So nothing complicated about it. It's a simple to-do, right? Effectively, like how we have a to-do list. It really starts like that. An issue is just a to-do. I have to do something. It can typically have, at the most basic level, a to-do state, an in-progress state, and then a completed state. That's all, right? That's the most fundamental thing that happens with every to-do. So an issue is just basically a to-do, and the issue types are basically the types of to-dos. So in a project, we'll do stories, we'll do bugs, we'll do technical debt, we'll do hidden stories, which we don't want to tell people. So we can make all kinds of issues that we want, or issue types. And a set of a particular type of issues is basically an issue type scheme. So the word scheme is in general used for a set of a particular type of things. So a set of issue types that go together for a specific purpose or a specific project is called an issue type scheme. So issue type scheme 1 could only comprise of stories and bugs. There could be another issue type scheme which would be bugs and tasks, and so on and so forth. So depending on what purpose we want to use that issue type scheme for. Is everybody with me? Okay, let's make it more complicated gradually. So how does it look like in Jira? So I'll keep referring to Jira views so that you can also relate to it. So this is a page which shows issue types, and you can see with each issue type you have a related scheme. So you have a Scrum type issue scheme. So let's say in a Scrum type workflow, or in a Kanban type workflow, or in our own custom type workflow, we can have a set of different issues that we track. For even HR, for example, if you were using this, then you could have your, let's say people type workflows, people types, so different types of people that you are hiring. So yeah, very difficult, very easy to work with, so you can create different types of people also. So basically this is how it's, and you can see that each issue is tagged to a type of issue scheme. So there's something called technical debt, which is only tagged to one type of issue scheme. That's how you can configure it. So now, what's a workflow? So a workflow is basically a pathway that an issue takes. It's like you can imagine it's going on a road, and what are the different stops it will go to, right? So those are the statuses. So different stops are statuses, and the path, the road that it's going to take is the transition. So there are only two things basically in a workflow. So when a issue goes from status A to status B, it goes through a transition X. So every pathway has a name and every status has a name. And the combination of such status and transition roadways is basically a workflow. Clear? So how does it look like in Jira? So this is typically what you, I mean, how many of you have seen this kind of a diagram in Jira? Okay. So you can find this diagram in your project. I mean, I can probably show it to you later, but there are a lot of places from where you can pop up this diagram. So here you can see that there are different statuses which are marked in these rectangular blocks, and there are different transitions. So when you create an issue, it becomes open status. If it takes this pathway, which is resolving the issue, it becomes resolved. If you take start progress, it goes to in progress, and so on and so forth. Right? So this particular thing, this one instance is called one workflow. So let's create a workflow. Okay, we'll do a practical exercise, and so this is typically your Jira board, how it looks like. You'll find this workflows tab here, and it's a lot of fun creating workflows. So what you do is when you go to workflows, you just have to, sorry, I'm going to sit down to make it easier. So you add a workflow, and what that does is you typically have to give it a name. At this point in time, you don't need to worry about what this workflow is associated with, what it does for which type of issue. We're just going to create a workflow, which is only thinking about statuses and transitions that we want things to take. Our current domain is we're talking about a morning workflow. So let's forget about issues right now. Let's just focus on creating a workflow. So we call it morning workflow. And then it opens up a page like this, which is an editor. And you can see there are two options. You can add a status, add a transition. This is the start point. So this is always there. So you have something called create, and it's the first status that you see here that it automatically assigned is awake because I tested it. Otherwise, it could be open. You can call the status anything. So let's say we keep it awake. So what do we do when we get up, right? So the first thing we want to do is we wake up. So when we create a human, in this case, so he wakes up, the first thing. So what does he do next? So let's add a status. What happens to him next? So when you wake up, you brush your teeth, maybe. Okay. So let's say we call it brush. That's a status. So I've brushed my teeth. Let's call it brush. You can see my teeth. Uncheck this. So there are always three categories within which each status falls. As I said right in the beginning, either a to-do, it's either in progress or done. So this is in progress. So I'm starting to do something, so that's in progress. And the moment I click this, I get the status here, which says brush my teeth. Right. Now you can see that it's outlined in red because it doesn't connect to anything. There's no way I can brush my teeth yet. I mean, I don't know how. So what we do is we make a transition from waking up to brushing my teeth. And what's going to get us there? Brushing my teeth, right? So this is going from awake to, I can go from being awake to having brushed my teeth by brush teeth. So that's the transition. So that's a status, this is a status, and this is what I do to get to this status, right? And similarly, I can go on adding more statuses. So let's say bathed. And then I'll add another one, which is eaten. And look at that, some of us, just stop at eaten. So it's a category called done. That's where a day stops. So that's why, it's automatically taken done because it's based on my previous history of testing it. But otherwise, you can change the status as you want. And some people go to work, right? So reached office, right? So status is always in sort of past tense. And this is also done. and you have a workflow here. Now you have to have transitions. So we add a transition from so brush my teeth to bathed. Path. That's how you get there, right? And then you can see this gets added. So there are different ways to add it. You can either connect the dots or you can just add it from there. So from bathed to eaten, eat food, and we've got one here, and then you can introduce office, right? So go to work. So now we've got a workflow, right? So we've gone from waking up to eating food to reaching office. Some people could stop at eating food, but both are, for us, done, sort of done category items. Now, that's what a workflow is, right? So we'll stop at that and go back to our presentation. So that's how easy it is to really create a workflow. 12, isn't it? So we just created something like this, right? So we've got states and transitions. And similarly, we can create workflows for issues, right? So an issue goes, create an issue. As soon as that is created, it goes to open. Then we can have any kind of movement that we allow or we want to restrict. So what that does is if there is no transition from one point to the other directly, you cannot move. You'll always face an issue or error. So that's what you're setting the rules of how that to-do is going to move across different statuses. So let's do a quick quiz, okay? I'm going to ask a few questions. Maybe actually we can divide in teams. So right from this corner, or maybe slightly here, so Sushil onwards, let's just create a bit of a gap. So this is team 1, this is team 2. I'm going to put questions here. You've got to look at this workflow. Everybody can see this workflow, right? Yes. I'm going to ask questions, and they're typically yes/no questions. And whichever team shouts out first, the right answer gets the point. Okay? So I don't know if I have more than 5 questions or not, but I'll use this. Okay. Ready? Yes. So the first question is on this workflow: can you create an issue with resolved status?
No.
Okay. Right. Why no?
Because it is issue already. We need to start. Means it is issue. That's why.
Why do you think we cannot create an issue in resolved status?
It is a problem.
First, we need a to-do status.
Okay, I think you guys answered it correctly, but the reasons are because this is the point of starting actually. So when you do a create issue, it always comes to open. So there is no such thing for resolved. Okay, this is where a transition matters, right? There is no such transition to resolved.
Yeah.
So don't think from logic. Look at only this workflow, right? Okay, going next. Can you move an issue directly from open to closed status?
Yes.
Okay, 1. Okay, I got confused. Okay, ready? You've got to be a bit louder, I think, also. Okay, ready? Next question coming up. Yeah. So you can move from open because there is a transition which says close issue, right? Can you move an issue directly from close to resolved?
Yes.
Again.
No.
Yes. Directly close to resolve.
There is no transition. How will you go? How are you guys going to go to the resolve? 2-1, okay? Ready? Next coming up. Can you move an issue directly from open to reopened?
No.
Okay, good job. These guys are getting it. 3-1, okay? Ready? Kahan se dekha? Okay, ready? I think this is probably the last question. Can you move an issue from in progress to open?
No.
Yes.
Yes, you can because there is a transition. right? Okay. 3, 2. Oh, sorry. 3, 2. Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Good. Good stuff. So now you're getting a hang of how it works, right? So this is how it's enforced in Jira. So you could see that there's some transitions from the diagram. You could see that didn't make sense. So you have this workflow button. If you click on it, only the workflows which are eligible will appear in this section. And even if on the board you try to move them, they won't move if the transition doesn't exist. So we had this workflow we created, brush your teeth and all. So we can now, what we can do is we can create a workflow for each issue type, right? So I just kind of made this up. So we've got different people have different habits. Like some people, boys might just wake up, brush their teeth, and come to work. Those will be a bit more disciplined. They'll eat food, they'll come to work. And some people will just wake up and come to work, right? So there could be different issues which would behave differently, right? So similarly, stories can have a different workflow, bugs can have a different workflow, or they can have the same workflow as well. Okay. Now this mapping of each story or each story with a workflow or each story type with a type of workflow is called a workflow scheme, right? So you basically create a workflow, tag it with an issue, you create another workflow, you tag it with an issue, and these sets of this sort of set of these issue to workflow mappings is called a workflow scheme. And how does that look? Oops. Oh, I think. Yeah, so how does that look in Jira? This is how it looks. So here you can see that all the issue types are mapped to a single workflow. So all these issues follow the same workflow. I could have probably given a better example, but you could, if typically, and this is a workflow schemes page. So if let's say a different issue had a different workflow, then it would appear here as another workflow to issue mapping. Because all the issues are mapped to one type of workflow, therefore it's appearing as one, but otherwise you would have different issues mapping, and these sets would be a single workflow scheme. Right?
Yep.
Okay, so that completes the picture. So we've covered issue type schemes, workflows, issues, and that's mainly what a project needs. And this is typically where we configure these on the Jira dashboard. So this is typically for administrators, and that's what they do. So they configure these issue type schemes here, issue types here, workflows and workflow schemes. And we would think that's the end of the story. But there is more. So what about the fields, right? So we have issues, and issues have fields. So fields look like this. So we see these assignee, due date, and so many of them, like sometimes, and some are custom, some are pre-built. So you have a lot of these fields, and they all are a common attribute of issues, because every to-do, can have a due date, can have an assignee who's going to do it, can have it, or we can make custom fields, right? So now you understand, now you're starting to get a hang of workflow schemes, issue type schemes, how schemes really work, right? So we also have something called field configurations. Now you have to be very careful and be with me, because this is going to get slightly complicated, but it's still following the same pattern. So let's say we have a big configuration and we have a small configuration. So we take a set of fields and we call it big config. We take a set of other fields and we call it small config, right? So we can create a set of fields, just like how we created set of bugs and set of issue types and call it issue type scheme. We can take set of fields and call it big config, small config, so different types of field configurations. Then we can, similar to how we attached a workflow with an issue, we can also attach field configurations with issues. So we can say a bug has this type of config, story has this type of config. So we don't need all the fields for bugs. So we can just have a set of fields that will be attached to a bug. And just these set of story to field configuration mappings is called a field configuration. Easy, getting easy. Sort of, you see the pattern, right? So basically any group of things which is a scheme, and these are the different types of. So you've covered fields. The fields get grouped into field configurations. They get tagged to each issue types, and they convert into field configurations. And this is how it looks like in Jira. Oh, sorry, this is an issue type screen scheme, which is different. So just ignore the screen. But typically, okay, if I was to look at this, if you didn't read screen schemes, if you read it as field configuration schemes, so then a story would have a particular field configuration, bug would have a field configuration, and that's how it would work. Sorry. Okay, so that was field configuration and field configuration schemes. Now we're going to talk about screens. Now you see different screens at different points, right? And each screen has all the fields that you need to fill. And some screens have all the fields, some screens have some fields. So it's not like every screen, although that there could be like, let's say 10 fields which are attached to an issue type. But when we create an issue, we only need to fill out 4 fields. So in the create screen, we only get 4 fields. When we are editing that issue, we get all the 10 fields. When we are deleting an issue, or when we are sort of moving an issue, then we have, or viewing an issue, we have different set of fields. So we can configure all of that. And to do that, what we can do is we can create our own screens. So again, similar to how field configurations worked, we can create a screen which has certain set of fields. We can create a screen which has some less set of fields. So we can call a simple screen and a complex screen. We can attach them to issue operations. Okay. So when we create an issue, then open this screen. When we edit an issue, then open a complex screen. But when we view an issue, open a simple screen. And this set we're going to call mostly complex screen scheme. So this is tied to issue operations, create, edit, views, like our CRUD operations. These are the 3 operations that we need to have. Then we have another screen scheme which says when you create, make a complex, but when you edit and view, just make it simple, right? So that's a mostly simple screen scheme. Next, can anybody guess what happens? We've got a complex screen scheme, we have a simple screen scheme, and we've got all the issue type operations which are mapped to the screens. What could possibly go next? That's the next step. Required fields are here. Like, so we have created a set of fields that are being shown in a type of screen, and we have got similarly we've got like 2-3 types of screens we have created, and we have tagged the set of operations that we perform on an issue to those mapping of
screens to issues.
Correct. That's what happens, right? So you map issues to these screen schemes. So you could have a bug which is mostly simple screen scheme where every time you create a bug, you get a complex screen. Every time you edit a bug, you get a simple screen. Every time you view a bug, you get a simple screen. In a story, every time you create a bug, you get a complex screen. Every time you create a bug, edit a bug, you get a complex. Edit a story, you get a complex screen. Every time you view a story, you get a simple screen. And this is what's called an issue type screen scheme. Okay. So this is a bit more complicated than the workflow schemes and all, but this would complete your full picture, and this is how a screen scheme looks like. So you can see that a story is tagged to a screen scheme. So be very careful of the words here. I'll go back to this. This is a screen scheme, which basically shows that we have what types of operations map to what types of screens. That's a screen scheme. So all the things you can do on a issue type, you've got here. And this is an issue type screen scheme. So that's the difference. That's where the sort of tricky bit is. So for an issue type screen scheme, we have a set of screen schemes which are mapped to issues. Screen scheme mapped to issue. Yeah. And that is finally the full picture. Okay, that's all you need to do. That's all you need to know. If you understand this, you can configure Jira whichever way you want. You can create different types of screens, custom schemes, custom fields, custom issue types, anything you want. You can use it for HR, you can use it for project management, you can use it for administration management, anything actually. But of course, it's the most useful application is in software because you have so many different workflows, different transitions you need to make, so you can set those rules in place. And all of that you can do, because once you understand these concepts, you just have to figure out, okay, what workflow do I want how complex do I want my screen to look like? What are the fields I really need for this issue type? Those are the kind of questions you have to worry about, and if you know how to configure it here, it's a cakewalk, right? But I'm still not going to let you go. There is something called a resolution. That's the last thing I would want to leave you with. So resolution is a type of field which is, it's like which gives a final verdict on an issue. So this is a type of field which says whether a story or a bug has finally completed or not. Okay. And the beautiful thing about Jira is you can configure that as well. So you can create different resolution types. You can call it done, won't do, maybe I'll do. So all of these are resolution types, and typically you find them here. They're not editable here by default, but here it says, for example, resolution is done. That means, and how Jira processes this field is it gets to know that, okay, I need to pull it out of the backlog or out of the active stream. That is why when you move something to accepted, you wonder how does it disappear? Have you wondered?
Yeah.
Right? It disappears because what happened is in our workflow creations, we had something called post functions. When an issue is actually moving to done, so this transition, so this is the transition which is highlighted, and I'll show it to you there as well. So this is a transition, and transition has these 5 parameters. So you can configure a transitions post function, and in the post function, you can set the resolution as done. That's how Jira knows that I need to take this out of the backlog. Okay. Just to make it easier, should I show it to you? So we made this morning workflow, right? So this is how a status options for a status for a status you only have properties that you can change. But for a transition, let's say when I go to work, I have something called post functions, and I click on this. It opens this sheet, and you can see that there is nothing called resolution, marked resolution as done. So we can add a post function. And we can set resolution to done. Set issue security level. Add. Update issue field. So you select this. And you field value. Issue field resolution, and you only have a set type of resolution. You can configure this and you say done. So you set it to any field value, it will take it out of the backlog because it knows that the resolution is set. So that resolution field just has to be set with something, and this helps you filter later on, what happened to those issues. So we'll set it to done, and when we add this, so you can see the resolution of the issue will be set to done. So if that happens, then that issue will move out of the backlog. Now what you can do is you can look at some other transitions and you can reset the resolution field to unassigned as well. So sometimes you might have observed that there's a strikeout in your field. That's because the resolution was set to done. But sometimes when you move it back to do, you still don't get that strikeout disappear, right? Because nobody reset the resolution to not done.
That was already non-editable.
What is non-editable? No, so you just have to, in your workflow, what you have to do is, so in this case, what we did was, like in the morning workflow, when we go to work, when we reached office, when we go to work, at that point, when you're moving a ticket or you're moving a person from eaten to reached office, in that transition, Jira will call a post function which will set the resolution to done. Now what we need to do is, what if he reached office and went back to brush his teeth, right? Or maybe, I mean, we don't have a transition, but let's say we create a transition here, right? And reached office to status, and we call it bunk office, right? So if that guy bunked office, then we can set a post function.
Not done.
Exactly. Where we change the value of the field resolution to not done. So what will happen is when somebody moves the ticket from reached office to back to brush his teeth, the resolution will disappear and the issue will still be there. Or then the strikeout will go away. So that's how Jira treats that when resolution is set to anything, done, may not do, or whatever, it will make sure that it will format it in a different way and treat it in a different way. And at the end of, let's say, a sprint, it will take it out of the backlog also. These are the things that Jira will do to a ticket which has a resolution set to. So I guess you get it, right? So okay. And then what happens? That's all. Okay, so that's the essentials of Jira. Just a bit of trivia. So when the Atlassian guys who were working on this Jira product, do you know how this name came about? The word Jira. So at that time, actually, Bugzilla used to be the most popular issue tracking tool, and the team at Atlassian wanted to take a stab at them. So they wanted to create something called Godzilla. And that's how the word Jira came. So Godzilla is like the abbreviated version. Jira is the abbreviated version of Godzilla. So it's Jira. And maybe Australians call it like that. Jira. Godzilla. There's some YouTube videos you can have a look. Workflow schemes and screen schemes. You can check them out if you want to. They're the sort of shortest videos I could find if you want to refresh your concept, but you can have a look at the presentation as well. But that's it. Cool. Not bad. We made it 5 minutes before time. Questions?
So, like for, I think this is made for generic use of this platform for any kind of task. So, any kind of fields, other domains than software. But for software, we have a standard or predefined workflows and schemes. So, do we really need to create custom things?
I think we don't have standard defined schemes. We have some prescriptive schemes. But this is the power of Jira. Why Jira wanted to make it flexible and editable is because different teams have different types of workflows they follow. There are small teams, there are large teams, and fundamentally Agile talks about inspecting and adapting, right? So it's not about sticking to a particular type of process, but reflecting on whether it's working or not, and then improving that. So you could go back to your workflow and say, hey, this step doesn't make sense, or I need to restrict people from moving a ticket from to do to bugs reported every time. They need to make sure they're actually in progress before they move to bugs reported. So if you look at your own own workflows, they typically look like all transitions go to that particular status. Like if I show you what a typical project looks like, I can actually show you what's even implemented in, so let's say the workflow scheme in simplified credit. So I'll show you. So this is the simplified software simplified workflow for project SCR, and so this been all unassigned types. This is a default. So basically all the issues are mapped to this workflow. So that means basically bugs, tick stories, all of them follow the same workflow, and which is this. You couldn't have made it simpler for yourself, right? You can move all transitions. You have like everything. You don't have any flow that you need to follow. You can take a ticket. Of course, you need to start with to do, because this circle is basically from where the issue is created. When it's created, it's always in to do by default. And then you could move it anywhere, because all basically means from all of these you can move to done. From all of these you can move to delivered. From all of these you can move to test. That's what this workflow says. And that's like no rule, right? It's jungle rule. Like you go anywhere. Like you go from to do to require clarification if you want. Right. So we don't want that, ideally. That's how a lot of our workflows might be working actually also. So we need to go and inspect what our workflow is. But if you restrict it, then you are actually enforcing some sort of process, right? And the person needs to think, well, can I really do that? So basically that's in every kind of team, you'll realize that you can customize the workflow the way you want. If you're a small team, you don't want a lot of steps involved, then you can just have simple workflows. If you want more complex workflows, you can make them as complex as you want. You want to reduce the statuses, you can reduce the statuses. Yeah, so on and so forth.
We can import existing workflows.
Yeah, so there are some standard workflows that come with Jira. So when you create, which is why like Jira automates so much for you that you don't realize that this was already created. So you never go here. All you have to do is set up a project, and you get all of these things that Jira will orchestrate for you. So it will create the scheme, issue type schemes based on standard assumptions. The moment you say I want to do Scrum, it will give you this. But do you really want this? Like, you should go back and inspect. You should make sure that you check your settings to know that this is exactly how I want to run my process. So for QA, for example, right? If you want to change your workflow and you don't want the team members to move tickets just randomly, then you should go back to the workflow and restrict that transition. You shouldn't allow a person to move a ticket from one, and that you can go and do it in the workflow. So this is one of the key tools.
Coming to the resolution part, so if if the resolution is set, so it will like came out from backlog, but that thing is also configurable. Like if I set to some particular resolution, then only we can get that issued out from backlog.
No, so resolution field, as long as it's set, Jira will take it out of backlog. But what you can configure, and I'll show you that, is here, resolutions, which is why it has a separate, it has a special section in the menu. You can have different types of resolutions. So you can say that won't do, done, duplicate. You can create a new type. And if I create this new type, then if you remember the drop down for the resolutions, it will appear there.
So it will go under the core things like either to do, in progress, or done. So
those are just categories, yeah.
Okay. So any resolution we create has to be sub part of either to do or in progress or done.
Resolution is a field.
Okay.
Okay. Every issue has fields, and every issue mandatorily has the resolution field.
Okay.
Okay. What we were doing in the workflow is, in that transition from moving from one status to the other, we were calling a method, automating the setting of that resolution field to done. To done or to won't do or to duplicate, we could have decided at that point, because if you, I'll go back to make it easier. So let's add a resolution type here, right? So let's call it reconsider or pushback, right? Pushback to product, maybe. And we add this. Now what this does is, it's going to give you an option. Now when we go to workflows, then in our morning, now it's not going to make sense, but you could, or actually I could have opened any other workflow. So in this transition from eaten to, we had set the resolution to done, which was our way to tell Jira that take this out of the backlog, mark it, strike it off. What you can do is you can edit this, and now you can change the field value to push back to product. Right? So that's your reason for marking the resolution. That's what it is doing here. But as long as it's set, Jira knows that you've completed. You're not going to do, basically what this means, or this is telling Jira, is you're not going to act on it anymore. That's it for you. You don't want to see this issue ever again. Take it out of my view. That's what we're telling Jira with this. Resolve it. That's what we're telling. Why resolve it? Jira doesn't care. You can do, if you care, put it here and track it.
So resolution is mandatory.
Yeah, it is. Otherwise, your issues won't disappear.
Final destination.
Yeah, it's a final destination.
So then we can set a rule that if a certain ticket is saying push back to product, then somebody will pick it up. If they update,
So then you make that a status because you're still acting on it.
No, but if they move it to do or whatever, like push back to product now, in a real world scenario. Like
This is, by the way, a reason for resolution.
Right. Okay. So like,
Yeah.
somebody gave a ticket, we were not clear, and then we said push back into product. So it means like move it out of my backlog because I'm not going to do something like this.
Yeah.
But somebody else has to do something like this.
Yeah, so actually pushback to product is then not a good example here because the way you are using the word pushback to product, you are still wanting somebody to come into the Jira board, have a look at the ticket.
Right.
So, but when I said pushback to product, I meant that I'm not going to look at it. Product will have its own backlog where it will address it. But from my board, it's disappearing. Now I don't have to act. I don't have to act on it also. But I don't have to. Nobody has to act on it in my board. So, yeah. So basically, if this would have read, let's say, product decline, or will never do, that's more appropriate to your. So I may have used a term which has probably caused that confusion. But if your intention is still to do anything on that ticket, you want to preserve the view and the history and everything, then you should make that a status so that it still appears on the board, still appears in the backlog. People can look at it, comment on it, do any action on it. But if you don't want any further action on the ticket, then resolve it and give it a reason for the resolution. Most common reason is done, which we don't even realize it's the default reason because it's done, things are done, nothing's gonna happen. And the other reasons also, as you can see, don't require any action, won't do. I won't do it, right? I mean, do what you want.
So that can happen like from to do to accepted direct, the final destination.
I mean, you can even make in progress, when you move the transition from to do to in progress, you can mark the resolution, it will disappear. That's what Jira allows you to do. I mean, it's up to you how you want to apply it. I'm just telling you the tool's capability. How you want to apply it is up to you. I'm not giving you a mandate. I'm not giving you a prescriptive because that's not the idea. Don't try to apply like sort of a rule on it anymore. Just try and understand the capability and what you can do with Jira, and just like sort of imagine the possibilities.
Can there be two resolutions in the same flow? Workflow?
No, because it's a drop down.
No, but if we add another one, so
no. Well, well, that's a good question. So I think you can change it. So when you move a resolution to done, and then you move the status, at that point you can reset the resolution to won't do.
So let's say just take an example.
Yeah. So
I
like
made one status called.
so let's say done.
Yeah.
So right. So we'll keep this as done. So when you move from eaten to go to work, this thing is done. But when you move from go to work to, let's say, brush your teeth, then the resolution would be won't do. We can do that, right? So
So what can be like resolution for a ticket which was in to do, follow the workflow, follow the different swim lanes and was accepted, but then a bug was observed again in the release testing or later. So is it so we can of course push it from accepted to do, but like what can be resolution then?
you decide what you want.
That
But if you set a resolution, then it'll disappear. That's not the idea. That's a workflow transition.
okay.
But it disappears only when you
Close the sprint, yeah.
Not before that.
Not before that. Yeah. That's where, I mean, it gives you that option to within the sprint act on it and undo the resolution. Once you close the sprint, it's gone. Which also is a function on close sprint, by the way. That's an advanced concept, but Jira allows you to configure that as well. You can technically just make it disappear the moment you move it to, so you'll have nothing in accepted. You move that and it goes out. Imagine.
So if the resolution is set and the ticket is moved from backlog to nowhere, so if I go to search bar and search that particular ticket and change the status to anything else,
Yeah.
then the resolution will be emptied or
You can set it. You can go to a specific issue. Like there are ways to get back because the issue is not deleted.
Yeah.
Issue is still there, but it's just made it easier for you to view it. or not view it when you're not acting on it. So it's not like that issue is dismissed. You can always go back to the issue, reset the resolution if you want, if you're an admin, if you have those privileges. You can reset it and set it to unassigned, no resolved, and then it'll appear back in backlog. And it'll preserve its history of what happened. Right. So that's good. So just imagine like the possibilities. This is what Jira. This is how Jira is handling it. This is Jira's way of looking at an issue or at a workflow or at a transition. You can do whatever you want with it. You can set a transition from awake to brush my teeth and set it resolved. Right. That's the reason why I took this. I took this example rather than an issue example, because I want you to break this mindset of looking at it only from an issue perspective, because that can confuse. Because you're used to seeing an issue moving to accepted getting resolved. But you can actually create any workflow. You can create any transition. You can create any resolution point, any transition which causes a resolution. You can manually set the resolution as well if you're giving them privilege. That is all controlled by the admin privileges. Ask your question.
How to get admin privileges?
Huh?
How to get admin privilege?
Very simple. Sign up on Jira. You should probably, all of you should try sign up on Jira. Atlassian would be very happy to suddenly see 20 signups or 40 signups. But try it out. Try to create your own workflows. It takes like 15-20 minutes, but really helps you clarify concepts. And all these options that you see, we've covered everything. We've covered screens, we've covered issue types, we've covered workflow types, we've covered field configurations, and that's all there is. Once you understand these fundamental concepts of Jira, how they work and what you can do with it, Jira, you're like the most powerful Jira user. You can do whatever you want. You can go back and change. Of course, there's a lot more to Jira, which we'll cover in the rest of the sessions, but this is the foundation. This is when you set this up, when you know how under the hood Jira is working, or what it's doing, then you can build on top of it. Yeah? Cool. Exam time? All right, thanks guys.